So you want to know how an architect got into learning computer code. It's a bit of a journey, but here's the background in a nutshell. I've gone through a few jobs just using the software that I have been given. It's Revit. Most firms are using Revit, so I've used it with a little bit of AutoCAD. Not thinking much about it being software. I just used it like a tool, like I would pull a hammer out of a tool belt and just start nailing something. I don't really think about how the hammer is made. I don't I just think about how to use the hammer and the basics of getting the job done. Well, then a few years in, I thought about this is a complicated piece of something the computer's doing. So let's learn how to use it well instead of, taking that hammer, to go back to that analogy, and just hitting it on any side. Sure, hitting it using the main proper face of it, but then sometimes turning it on the side and whacking it with the broad side, whacking a nail the wrong way, and then, heaven forbid, using the claws to try to get a nail in a wall. Let's actually learn how to use this software properly, the way the developers meant for it to be used. Let's find out what it's capable of doing and the limitations of that eventually once I get very good with the software. So went down that rabbit hole when I worked for a contractor as their only in-house designer, and then worked for an architect, got my architect license, moved to a different job, and in those jobs in the architecture firms after working for the contractor, I found myself as really the only person who was looking into using the software well. It seemed like everybody else was just saying, oh, I want this software to work the way that I think. And I thought that's not the way to go. These developers are people, they've made the software to work a specific way. Well, with limitations and with certain tools built into it. So I thought, why are other people not asking how to use the software well? And I think there's a lot of reasons for it, but at the end of the day, it's that they didn't want to invest time into learning something new like that they didn't see as a direct benefit to making the PDF that would get the building permit and get them paid by their boss at the end of the day. So it was, I guess, different priorities for each person. I don't blame anybody for that, but I do think that it's a loss of an opportunity on their part. And so I don't want to lose that opportunity. So I've been thinking about Revit and other software I've learned along the way, other software I've used, as complicated pieces of computer code compilations. So that's how I got into it, really. Then I started listening to people who are really experts at using Revit well, and they're paid very well for it. At least from what I can tell, paid better than I am, I'm sure. Some of those people are the Aussie Bin Guru, the Revit Kid, the team at Parallax Team, others, BIM Pure. That's Nicolas Catalier. I think I'm pronouncing his name right, if I know my French at all. Some others along the way, and realize that there is power in learning how to use computer code, like how to read it, how to write software, even if it's just an add-in. I say just, that's far beyond my ability right now. There's a lot of power, though. I've heard the term leverage used with coding, and I think that's an accurate way to think about it. It's a lever that when you're trying to, let's see if I can do this properly on screen, when you're trying to use Revit just in the way that you want to use it, just kind of force it to do what you want. You have the fulcrum right here on a lever, and you're pushing down really close to the fulcrum. So you're doing a lot of work just to try to get that lever to go down. But the thing is that lever has has a lot of length and it has many points at which you can push on it. So then there's learning how to use Revit well just as it is, which goes further away from the fulcrum, and that's more powerful because you have to exert less force, less effort to use the tool well to get out results that you want. And then there is things like learning how to code. And really using Revit as software, thinking of it in the terms that the developers made it. Then you're going closer to the end of the lever, and it doesn't take much effort at all to get that lever to move quite a bit. So I hope that analogy works, but that's how I got into coding. Okay, so that's the background in a nutshell. Day one of my documentation of my journey in coding as an architect. How did it go? Well, I've got a little bit of background, so I've gone through a few courses on codeacademy.com, like three or four of their courses, not too many. So I've become aware of some basics of the language called Python. And I've heard it's the most beginner friendly, so that's why I'm starting with it, along with the existence of PyRevit, which is an add-on that a gentleman made some years ago, and it is very powerful, not just because of the tools it comes with, but because it allows people to access the back end, the code side of Revit more directly by making their own add-ins. As far as I understand, I'm still on my journey of learning this stuff, so I could be wrong in saying some of this. Day one, to get to it. So I have a little bit of background with code. I know basics like uh, data formats, types, I mean, like strings, floats, integers, booleans, stuff like that. Some basics like what a method is, what a function is, and the limit of what I've learned so far is roughly what object-oriented programming is, which that's, I won't get into that, but it's a big part of coding as far as I'm learning. And so, starting day one on this journey, I am reviewing some things that I've learned in the past because I spent most of that time learning, going through those courses on Code Academy. That was mostly last year, so it's been several months, and it's been good. So it's been a refresher day. It's a little bit overwhelming, even though it's stuff that I've been familiar with before. Uh, so tomorrow I'll probably start into the new stuff, the more detailed parts of coding, more advanced topics than what I've covered so far. So there we go. How did I feel when I first started learning code last year? That's probably more relevant for this discussion. I felt fairly overwhelmed. It's a lot like learning a new language. They call it a computer language, and that is a great analogy because I felt like I had just dropped myself into a new country that speaks a foreign language, and I hadn't really had much background. I just started listening. And I had a teacher along the way. That was the Code Academy course. So that helped much more than just trying to write code from not knowing anything. I wouldn't have gotten far that way. But it was still uh, quite a whirlwind, quite overwhelming, but not to the point where I wanted to quit. It was exciting at the same time. So I wanted to keep going day after day. And so the word I used and the word I'm still using is persist. That's what I would advise someone who is learning to code, an architect who is also on the start of their journey learning to code. I would say keep in mind the word persist. Just keep going. Even when you don't feel like it, even when you're just like feeling like I don't really want to do this. Is this really going to amount to anything? When the doubt starts to creep in, keep going. I don't even know if anything's going to come of my journey yet. I'm still recording this as I go. So we'll find out how this ends, or at least what becomes of it for my career. But for now, nothing has. I'm not getting paid for this. Nobody's saying anything to uh, give me accolades or anything. I'm on my own in this. My wife is supporting me, but that's the most I got. So we shall see what comes of this, but persist. That's what I'm telling myself at the very start of this journey, and that's what I counsel you to do as well. All right, that is day one. I'm feeling hopeful and a little bit overwhelmed, but with excitement underneath it all. The excitement will ebb, and that's where the persistence will come in. All right. I'll talk to you on my next recording of the journey.